Well, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, no matter what time of day it is where you're at when you're joining us. We want to thank you for joining us here today on the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network. Hey, it's just two of us today because Brandy is heavily involved in teaching her CSR class at the Learning Loft there in Kansas City. And she's got a full house and things are going very well there. Keep in mind, she'll have another one of those coming up in August this year. So it's a great place to send your office staff to for 2 days of in depth intensive training. And Josh is away today. He has a family reunion, so he's with his family in, I believe, Gatlinburg, Tennessee. Cheryl's where he's at. So today's subject matter, our topic we want to go over in this session today is communication. And as I put in the promotional for this broadcast, communication is a very important thing. And in today's world, it's becoming even bigger of an issue in learning to properly communicate. And this is going to be if you're in a leadership position, if you're a member of the team, if you're communicating with customers, communicating with those you lead, communicating with those you love, your family members, and everything else. Communication is definitely a skill that we all have to learn. And the bad thing about communication as a person that writes a lot of articles and books and other things, I can hire an editor or we can run a computer check using Grammarly on the words that we're using, where the commas get placed and all that kind of stuff to make the best written communication. But the problem with oral communication is there is no editing. You can't go back and change your words. And when you flub, what are you going to do? I know in our public speaking training, one thing that Cheryl and I were taught is when you flub up and you're doing a presentation, you got one of two choices. One, you keep going, or number two, you stop and apologize if you feel that's a requirement where you just made that mistake. But we're talking here today about the spoken communication, how you communicate with others. And Cheryl, by the background she has and the training she has, this is part of what she knows and understands so well as part of being a DISC assessment coach and being able to assess personalities, which includes their communication styles, both in the way they speak and the way they need to be spoken to. So Cheryl, let's start out there. What in a disc can help someone with their communication style to get better?
Well, actually, there's one page that's donated to nothing but that. It's a page that in my disc I would give you, or I would give to anyone else, so they could see how I would like to be spoken to. And it's great if you have the other persons because we hear in different languages, and I don't mean French, English, whatever. We hear certain things if we're in certain groups. We assimilate the words differently. Different people, do we hear them? Yes, but we take them in at different things. I think we laugh a lot of times and just call that selective hearing. It's not. It's the way we're geared to hear. Now, I do believe men, sorry about that, do have selective hearing any way it goes. But with a lot of times the way I say it to you, I could say something to you, Brandy could say something to you, and you would hear it from one or the other. And I think that's part of the things when you're always saying, if you're the owner of the company and you tell someone something, they don't hear it. But when a stranger comes in and says it, they hear it and understand it. And I think that's the way that the leader's communicating to that person. It's not that they're ignoring him, they're just not grasping what he says.
Yeah. And one of the things is, I think that's all important is how we answer someone whenever they share an idea with us. Let's say that someone has given you the craziest, stupid, most asinine suggestion you've ever heard in your life. And a lot of times, what we want to do, we want to laugh about it, tell jokes about it. But what this does, in a way, it puts a wall up between you and them. And, I learned a long time ago when somebody comes up with great ideas, and I often ask people, what's your first words out of your mouth? What's the first words you're going to say that instead of putting up a wall, It's going to create communication. And what I'm trying to get them to do, and I try to share with people, hey, tell people that sounds like a great idea. Now, would you tell me how we do that? Get them to tell you what it is that needs to be done to make this idea work. And a lot of times that communication is what can instill a lack of, a sense of cooperation between people. And this is what you've got to be doing. You've got to always make your words in such a way that they never erect a wall between you and the other person. Also, one of the most important skills that any of us can ever learn, and Cheryl alluded to something a while ago, which is selective hearing, okay? And she kind of got a little bit of sexist there with that because she said males are afflicted with this. But do you hear what other people say? Are you actually listening to other people to understand what they're trying to say? Or are you putting your words together for a reply to this other individual? And this is part of being an effective communicator. And we see this in people that are in leadership positions. The President of the United States, how many of us can remember when Donald Trump, and this is nothing against President Trump, it was his personality, but how many can remember him shutting a reporter down and challenging reporters? And what did it do for his following whenever he did that? You've got to be extremely careful in your words not to shut down what other people are thinking and the words that they're going to say, because what it does, it just puts a wall up in that communication. And communication is vastly important, especially when you're married to someone else, when you have a life partner and you're living with them together. Communication becomes very difficult. It's very hard sometimes to share your innermost feelings with other people. So, Cheryl, where would you go next with what I'm saying?
Well, a lot of times we open our mouth and the words fall out. They don't make, they're not nice. They're not conductive to getting you anywhere. You're right. Another way, as far as, letting them answer it their way, if they can't come up with a way, my second suggestion, if it's like, it's just an idea and it's not really smart and they're saying something like that, what I usually do is look at it and say, well, it's like you said before, it's a great idea, but let me give you a scenario and you tell me if this might work too, and let them make the choice, give them your ideas. A lot of times it will start a ping pong effect between you, which is communication, and you can actually work it out between the two of you. You may be amazed what good ideas are there if you're willing to listen to, because what they said may make no sense. It may have been stupid. They may not have known how to get it out in words. But once you start communicating with them, if you can take the bits and pieces and let them say what they really had on their mind instead of what they thought you wanted to hear, you get that camaraderie between the two of you. That's really important to me when it's, your children or your spouse, because a lot of times we just say something and we assume that they heard it the way it came out of our mouth. And then anger sets in, somebody gets quiet. 2 or 3 days down the road, there's an argument over nothing that came from a remark that was said that was not heard the way it was sent out.
Yeah. And in business, one of the most important things that we often function on or we concentrate on is how to make more sales. And one of the keys of making more sales, and something we teach in our classes, is what we call believability. Believability. And to have believability and to build trust and to build a relationship, you got to look at yourself. Just how well are you reacting to your customers' questions? Are you even answering the customers' questions whenever they ask them? Or are you so intent that you got to get your point across that you're not listening to the concerns of that client? And this is a very difficult thing to conquer. That's one of the reasons in our believability training and what we used to call sales training, we highly recommend that you record your conversations with your customer. It's what we call a virtual quality control. And after you have finished that sales communication, that sales performance, to actually listen to it. Are you interrupting your customer? Cheryl, if somebody interrupts you while you're talking, how does that make you feel?
Makes you feel non-important. It makes you feel like they don't care what you're saying. They don't trust what you're thinking. And it takes your involvement in the conversation away. And it's just disrespectful is what it is more than anything else.
Right. But what it also does, to be honest with you, it raises your, I'm going to call it raising your blood pressure. It raises your anxiety level. It raises and it creates strife between people. So, one of the things that I've often heard is we were each given two ears and one mouth. So what we've got to do in this world is learn to listen twice as much as we speak, okay? And where we're not overriding, overrunning each other, and we can get our message across. Now, another thing that you've got to learn to do is you've got to learn to take pauses. And this is something that I was very guilty of for a number of years. And I've had to train myself in order to stop what I'm saying. I just have to stop. So it gives an opportunity for what I'm saying to sink in to the person that I'm speaking to. As you'll notice, as I'm speaking on here now, I'm taking momentary pauses through that. That was something very difficult for me to learn how to do. It took a lot of years to do that because people would often say, I'm listening to me is like it's like drinking water from a fire hose. It's coming so fast, they couldn't absorb it. And I had to implement that in my training, my presentation, my SWAT meetings, everything else in order to learn how to be a more effective communicator. Share what's your thoughts on that. Do you agree with the idea of you've got to take pauses and that you can fire off your words so rapidly that nobody can absorb them?
I agree, unless you're speaking to certain behavior people that have to. If you take too many pauses, they're sitting there like, come on, say what you got to say. Let's get it over with. You have to know your audience. When you're talking to a huge group of people like we both do, yes, you have to take the pauses. You have to speak slower. You have to give people time to understand what you're saying. But there's also another thing of knowing, if you're talking one on one, of knowing the person you're talking to. For me, I can live without the pauses. It's hard for me to, believe me, I understand. And but a lot of times it's all about who you're talking to and
Right.
how many you're talking to.
Right. So, in other words, in order to get further ahead in life, in order to get more of what you're doing, one of the things that one of our coaches, Larry Wingate, professed to us, and we went through training with Larry, was how to speak in sound bites. And what's a sound bite? And Larry even said, this is why I'm in demand at Fox News and other news stations because I can speak in sound bites. So, Larry, what's a sound bite? And he said, that's a paragraph that you speak in such a way that it makes the other person think, makes the other person think. And that's what you've got to do. If you're doing sales presentations or you're even disciplining a child, you've got to speak in such a way that they absorb that they're learning from it. And in that, you're trying to put together something that gives them a whole new point of view and where they understand fully the message that you're trying to get across. Do you remember Larry going through the soundbite exercises with us, Cheryl?
I do. It
Did,
was that one was a little hard for me in the beginning because um, I was noted for opening mouth and letting stuff run out instead of thinking. You really have to think through your thoughts. If you say, I mean, and it doesn't take but just a second. You don't have to stand there and look at the clouds to do it. You just have to think before you say something. And number one, you don't taste leather near as much if you do that.
yeah. Another coach we had that was very good on communication was Scott McCain. And one of the principles that Scott shared with us and that Scott teaches in his coaching and in his teachings as a speaker and everything else is the power of telling a story. a story about how what you did has helped other people. Because what you've got to do in sales is get the message across that you are selling to that customer. You're selling them a solution to their pain or a path to get to their dreams. One of those two things is what's going on. And the vast majority of people that are going to contract with you with your services, if you're in the home service arena, more than likely they have a pain. And what they're looking for, are you a person that I can trust to take care of this pain? But to do that, they've got to also see that you know how to listen to what they're saying. Do you know how to listen? So, again, I'm going to go back again and I'm going to recommend that one of the things I highly advise people to do is record themselves, record their presentations with their customers. And you're not going to do this without asking the customer's permission. I take a lot of people through this exercise in my believability classes, and I tell them the following. You're getting ready to have that kitchen table discussion. You're getting ready to sit down with the customer, and you tell them, well, Mr. Customer, if it's okay with you, we're going to go over the results of what we've got from this service call. Is this a good time to do that? And the customer's going to say yes or no. So the next thing is asking if you have permission to do the following. What I can do is, if it's okay with you, is I can record what I'm getting ready to share with you. That way, if you have any questions, you can pull this recording up. I'll be glad to send it to you in an email as an attachment. And that way, if you and your wife or your husband needs to review this with you, is it'll give you everything that we talked about today, because you're probably going to have some questions later that you don't think about today. So is it okay with you if I record this conversation? Now, after you've recorded this and you've done it on your digital device, and you're probably showing them photos of what you have photographed during this home visit, by sharing that with them in that way, what you're doing is you now have a way to monitor your own actions. When you leave that job site, going to your next job, turn on that recording, listen to yourself, or even give the recording to someone that you trust, a mentor, a coach, a manager, whoever, and let them listen to your presentation and see how it goes. By doing that, what you're going to be able to do is observe what you do, and you can perfect the craft of communication. Cheryl, what do you think about that?
That's so. I mean, if you and I go back and look at some of the first recordings we've done, they're hideous. Um, it's it's like I never spoke like that, but yes, you did. And until you know, what's the thing? Until you know, you don't know. So a recording is great. I go back still because I wonder why something didn't resonate like I wanted it to. Was I saying the wrong things? Was I saying it the wrong tone? It makes you a different person if you can hear yourself speaking, because you may not even like the way you talk to yourself.
Yeah. So, Cheryl, anything else you would want to add into this subject today of communication and how to be a more effective communicator?
Well, I've always said communication is 95% of most problems, and also the 95% of the cure of most problems. What I would like, I just like people to think before they speak, and speak in the correct language. And let's see, who have we here? Years ago, I learned a lot about my employees by requiring them to turn one cost saving idea each month. They help me understand how they think and how they like to be communicated with in turn. Every month we had a new cost saving idea, and in turn one on one communication time with each employee each month. I highly recommend implementing cost programs for any company. The communication benefits many times outweighs the actual cost. And I'm not sure who that is, but it is one super idea.
Yeah, and it kind of goes along the idea of the swap meeting, Cheryl. And I did two swap meetings this week, and last week I did some. Next week I've got some more to do and facilitating those. But the swap meeting, what it does, it allows everyone in the company to express their ideas. There's nothing crazy. And the amazing thing is, there's some fantastic ideas come out of these SWAT meetings. And it makes people realize what the problems of the company are and what they need to move. And what we're seeing companies mature through this SWAT process. By doing this over and over, year after year, we're watching their workforces becoming much more better communicators. At one time, the number one issue that we encountered in a SWAT meeting was communication, a lack of communication. But now I'm seeing that those companies' communication has dropped down because they are talking to each other more. They are communicating their ideas. They are understanding more and more. So we're seeing other things rise to the surface in a lot of companies as they mature through this, of what the leading challenges, what the leading weaknesses are in the companies out there. So again, SWOT meetings are all communication. And we have a process that we follow in the SWOT that helps bring the weaknesses to the forefront and helps everybody communicate. Like, one of the things I've recently started asking is, what does the customer of 2023 want whenever they call your company? What are they looking for? Why do they call you? What is their expectations a day? And by getting these thoughts out, it's amazing when you see all these different things come out, but it gives us something to shoot for. But again, this comes from us communicating as a group through a facilitated process that really produces some astounding results.
And they have turned out to be some of the best things I think we've ever done. Um, the thing about it is, that's the one time a year or two, however many some of them were doing two now a year. And that's the only time these people feel like they can speak and can speak freely. And the hope in all this is to let them know that they can come to at any time and speak. Because again, that's communication. They don't need to have to wait for the SWAT, even though most of them do.
Yeah. And it's an amazing thing. Like I said, I've got one client. We did a SWAT meeting back in the middle of winter. I think it was back in January, February. And they're actually having a follow-up SWAT amongst themselves next week. They scheduled a half a day of this to see how they have progressed from this last time when we met as a group when I was there. So continuing that communication process is something that really manages to get team buy-in. It's what you got to have. You got to have everybody on your team. And to do that, you got to become an effective communicator. It means you got to become leaders. Also, we got clients that are going through leadership training. They're training all their people on their team to be leaders, because people are determining that if they have a team of leaders, they're going to go much farther than they are as a group of followers working for a dictator. It's just not going to work. It doesn't work in today's world. It's the way it is. Okay. So good thing, Sheryl. Anything else you want to add before I close out this session today?
The only thing I'd like to add is for the younger people on here that may be listening, don't let text and your communication online in any way be considered the best way of communication. Communication is looking someone in the eye and having a one-on-one conversation with someone. I think that's where we're losing a lot of it nowadays, because yes, we can text all the words, but you don't get the emotions. You don't get as you know, I think eyes are the gateway to the person. So you don't see that person. Have a good talk with somebody, and whether it's an employee or your spouse, because that's what keeps your communication skills up to par.
Good words. So take those to heart. Sometimes maybe we're using too much digital communication. Maybe we're just relying on text too much. And the written word sometimes comes out wrong. It just doesn't say the right thing. So I think Sheryl just gave you some sound advice to consider. So with that, we're going to end this week's broadcast of the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network. And we really appreciate you joining us. We hope this conversation has been something that's of benefit to you. So plan to join us every week, same time here. We're usually broadcasting at 12 noon every Friday, 12 noon Eastern time. And we'd love to have you on here. And if you listen to the replay, we thank you for being here also with us. So we are CVC Success Group, and our mission is to help people in the home services category of work, the home services industry, in order to move their businesses from the one they dream of into the one that is their realities. We've helped a lot of people and we're continuing to help people. And if you think that we could be an answer for you, hey, reach out to us. Let's have a conversation. You can talk to myself, you talk to Cheryl, you talk to Brandy, talk to Josh, and we'll be glad to have a conversation, see where we can go with this. So appreciate you joining us today. Let us know how we can help you. And with that, we'll see you next week on the next episode of the Chimney and Fireplace